Hi, so this is going to be a new topic, metaphysics of the mind. And so this is an introductory PowerPoint to the whole concept of what do we mean by the mind. Now, there are two main areas that we need to be aware of. There's dualist theories, there's two of them, but there are four physicalist theories, as you can see. Now, the reason why I'm giving this is the overview of the whole topic, really, is that when we get into the detail, the minutiae of the different theories, it's difficult to work out where it fits in the bigger picture. So it's really good to have this big picture at the beginning there so you can see where to attach this individual piece of information that we're looking at. Now, to start off with all of this, I'm going to show you a video.
Look at your hand. How do you know it's really yours? It seems obvious, unless you've experienced the rubber hand illusion. In this experiment, a dummy hand is placed in front of you and your real hand is hidden behind a screen. Both are simultaneously stroked with a paintbrush. No matter how much you remind yourself the dummy hand isn't yours, you eventually start to feel like it is, and inevitably flinch when it's threatened with a knife. That may just be a temporary trick, but it speaks to a larger truth. Our bodies, the physical, biological parts of us, and our minds, the thinking, conscious aspects, have a complicated, tangled relationship. Which one primarily defines you, or yourself? Are you a physical body that only experiences thoughts and emotions as a result of biochemical interactions in the brain? That would be a body with a mind. Or is there some non-physical part of you that's pulling the strings but could live outside of your biological body? That would be a mind with a body. That takes us to an old question of whether the body and mind are two separate things. In a famous thought experiment, 16th century philosopher René Descartes pointed out that even if all our physical sensations were just a hallucinatory dream, our mind and thoughts would still be there. That, for him, was the ultimate proof of our existence. And it led him to conclude that the conscious mind is something separate from the material body that forms the core of our identity. The notion of a non-physical consciousness echoes the belief of many religions in an immaterial soul for which the body is only a temporary shell. If we accept this, another problem emerges. How can a non-physical mind have any interaction with a physical body? If the mind has no shape, weight, or motion, how can it move your muscles? Or if we assume it can, why can your mind only move your body and not others? Some thinkers have found creative ways to get around this dilemma. For example, the French priest and philosopher Nicolas Maubranich claimed that when we think about reaching for a fork, it's actually God who moves our hand. Another priest-philosopher named George Berkeley concluded that the material world is an illusion, existing only as mental perceptions. This question of mind versus body isn't just the domain of philosophers. With the development of psychology and neuroscience, scientists have weighed in as well. Many modern scientists reject the idea that there's any distinction between the mind and body. Neuroscience suggests that our bodies, along with their physical senses, are deeply integrated with the activity in our brains to form what we call consciousness. From the day we're born, our mental development is formed through our body's interaction with the external world. Every sight, sound, and touch create new maps and representations in the brain that eventually become responsible for regulating our experience of self. And we have other senses besides the typical 5, such as the sense of balance and a sense of the relative location of our body parts. The rubber hand illusion and similar virtual reality experiments show that our senses can easily mislead us in our judgment of self. They also suggest that our bodies and external sensations are inseparable from our subjective consciousness. If this is true, then perhaps Descartes' experiment was mistaken from the start. After all, if we close our eyes in a silent room, the feeling of having a body isn't something we can just imagine away. This question of mind and body becomes particularly interesting at a time when we're considering future technologies such as neural prosthetics and wearable robots that could become extended parts of our bodies. Or the slightly more radical idea of mind uploading, which dangles the possibility of immortal life without a body by transferring a human consciousness into a computer. If the body is deeply mapped in the brain, then by extending our sense of self to new wearable devices, our brains may eventually adapt to a restructured version with new sensory representations. Or perhaps uploading our consciousness into a computer might not even be possible unless we can also simulate a body capable of delivering physical sensations. The idea that our bodies are part of our consciousness and vice versa also isn't new. It's found extensively in Buddhist thought, as well as the writings of philosophers from Heidegger to Aristotle. But for now, we're still left with the open question of what exactly our self is. Are we a mind equipped with a physical body, as Descartes suggested? Or a complex organism that's gained consciousness over millions of years of evolution thanks to a bigger brain and more neurons than our distant ancestors? Or something else entirely that no one's yet dreamt up? If you'd like to dig deeper into the mind-body problem, we highly recommend you read or listen to I, Robot by renowned science fiction author Isaac Asimov.
Okay, so that's a really nice little short video looking at the overview of the different arguments that people have about the mind. Okay, and it's really good. Watch it again. So features of mental states, just a couple of key words: intentional properties and phenomenal qualities. One is external, one is internal. Intentional properties is more about the external world, and so it's believing about some things about the external world. Okay, there's an object out there. Phenomenal qualities are the subjective experiences. I'll read that out. Qualia are the subjective experiences of the phenomenal properties experienced introspectively. They are often non-intentional. Okay, a lot of long words there. Subjective experiences. Well, subjective is that I'm the subject, so they're my experiences. Okay, phenomenal properties. Now, you know what a phenomenon is. If you put hot water in a cup, then the phenomenon of that cup is going to become a hot cup. Okay, when you touch it, it will be a hot cup. So the property of that cup is now hotness, and I experience that hotness introspectively, okay, within myself. And it's non-intentional. I don't make the cup hot. When I touch the cup, it's hot. I have no control over the hotness of that cup when I touch it. Okay, so that's essentially what it's saying in fancy language. So intentionality about the aboundance of certain mental states which have a propositional content, so it's the external world out there. And qualia, that's a non-intentional phenomenal properties of certain mental states. Okay, so Descartes, back to him again. Well then, what am I? A thing that thinks, what is that? A thing that doubts, understands, affirms, denies, wants, refuses, and also imagines and senses. So he clearly seems to be talking about personal identity at this point. Now, Descartes didn't believe in the subconscious, really, whether he was aware of it or not, ironically. He believed that if there was a thought in your head, then you had to be conscious of it. Clearly now we are aware of the subconscious. And Patricia Churchland uses the example of linguistics. So I don't have a script for this. I'm just reading. When I see this screen in front of me, I'm rambling on, somebody would say. But I have no idea what I'm really going to be saying next. I'm not constructing grammatical sentences. I'm not aware of constructing grammatical sentences. And I'm just talking. And so my brain is working on a subconscious level, is what Patricia Churchland would say there, to enable me to be able to communicate. Now, there is a hard problem of consciousness, the explanatory gap. The gap between understanding the physical process of the brain and the nature of the experience. We can put people in MRI scanners now, and we can show them pictures of some beauty or ugly, or things that we find revolting, or pain. And then parts of their brain will light up and we go, oh, look, that part of their brain deals with pain sensory experiences. Now, that's the physical process. So we can see the physical process, but that tells us nothing about the nature of the experience of pain. So there is a gap there. There's also another gap in terms of our brain is made up of trillions of synapses and cells and chemicals being pumped out and electrical impulses firing across. But all of those things, none of those things have a consciousness. They are just doing what they do. There is no thought behind it. So where out of all those physical processes does this consciousness come from? Now, some people think consciousness is an illusion. It is a byproduct or an evolutionary necessity for this physical body to exist. Where other people would say intuitively, actually, no, there is a consciousness there. It is something separate from the body. It is something that we can identify with, that this is who I am. Now, two main areas of that: dualism, two basic parts of a human, spiritual and mental side. You call it the soul, the spirit, consciousness, and then you've got the physical side. And then so Plato and Descartes were dualists. Monism, Socrates was a monist. There is one substance, which leads to physicalism. So there is not this separateness of a soul, spirit, and then a body for them. So now both of those ideas are going to have ramifications in terms of in terms of like the afterlife, or how we use the like talking there about how we can we upload our consciousness. Well, it's interesting that the dualistic side is very often seen as the more religious side of it, because there's a separate soul and spirit. But you would need there to be some element of dualism if you are going to be downloading your consciousness into a computer, into a robot, because then your consciousness is not reliant on the physical body. So, as you can imagine, there's a lot for us to get our teeth into here and to discuss about what is the mind, and how does it relate to the brain, and how does the mind actually control us, and all those kind of topics. Okay, and that's what we're going to be looking at over the next few lessons.